My brother told my parents I quit the Navy. I didn't. 12 years later, his file landed on my desk. Part 1. The courtroom. My mother's hand flew to her mouth the moment I walked in. I'd imagined this moment before. Not obsessively, I'm not built that way, but in the quiet between deployments, in the dark before 0500 reveille, when the mind goes places it isn't invited. I'd imagined what it would look like when they finally saw me in uniform, what my father's face would do, whether my mother would cry. I hadn't imagined it would happen in a military courtroom. I hadn't imagined Tom would be the reason. The room was the kind of quiet that only exists in institutional spaces. The polished floor, the fluorescent hum, the weight of procedure pressing down on every surface. My shoes announced me before I spoke a word, sharp, steady, each step a sentence. I carried my documentation folder to the oversight table, set it down, squared the corners the way I was trained to do, and then, only then, I turned around. They were in the third row. My father's hair had gone almost completely gray. My mother was smaller than I remembered, or maybe that's what 12 years does. Compresses people in your memory until the real version surprises you. They were watching Tom at the defense table, the way parents watch children at recitals, with that particular brand of anxious devotion that doesn't know yet that the performance is already over. Then my mother looked up. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father grabbed the bench in front of him so hard the tendons in his forearms jumped. Tom saw me half a second later. The color left his face like a tide going out. For a moment, one long, strange, almost peaceful moment, nobody in that room moved. I sat down, opened my folder, and got to work. Part 2. Hopewell. I should tell you about Hopewell, Virginia, because Hopewell is where this story was built, brick by brick, before I was old enough to read the blueprint. Population 12,000. One high school. The kind of town where the same families have lived in the same houses for 3 generations, and everyone knows which Mitchell kid is the good one. Tom was the good one. Thomas Allen Mitchell, 4 years older. 6'1", broad-shouldered, with our father's jaw and our mother's eyes and a smile that worked on absolutely everyone. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, the woman at the pharmacy who gave him a senior discount starting at age 22 because he held the door and asked about her hip. Tom was magnetic in the specific way of people who've never had to work for affection and therefore never question whether it's real. I was the other Mitchell kid. Smart, they said, but serious. Doesn't smile enough. Works too hard. Rachel could stand to relax a little, my 6th grade teacher wrote in a progress note, which my mother kept, for reasons I've never understood, in a shoebox in the hall closet. I enlisted at 19, not because I had no other options. I had a partial scholarship to Virginia Tech that I deferred and eventually let lapse. I enlisted because I wanted to, because structure made sense to me in a way that Hopewell never had, because I'd watched my father spend 30 years working for a company that laid him off 6 weeks before his pension vested, and I decided very quietly that I would build something nobody could take from me. I told my parents on a Sunday in March at the kitchen table, with the windows open and the smell of my mother's pot roast coming from the stove. My father nodded slowly and said he was proud. My mother cried, but the good kind. Tom wasn't there that weekend. Tom was rarely there that weekend. He'd been going through what my mother called a rough patch, which I understood to mean drinking too much and working too little, and somehow still being forgiven for both. 3 weeks later, I was in Great Lakes for boot camp. I wrote home every week. My mother wrote back faithfully, long letters on the yellow legal pad she kept by the phone. My father sent cards with single sentences inside, working hard. Good. That was my father's entire emotional vocabulary, and I loved him for the precision of it. I'd been stationed at Naval Station Norfolk for 8 months. 8 good months, hard months, the kind that build something in you, when I came home for Christmas, and Tom was waiting. Part 3. The lie. I didn't know it was happening in real time. That's the part I've turned over 1,000 times. The lie was already in motion before I pulled into the driveway. Later, much later, I'd piece it together from context and inference because Tom never explained himself completely, not even in the hallway outside the courtroom with our parents standing 3 feet away and nowhere left to hide. But here's what I believe happened. Tom had spent 8 months watching our parents talk about me. Every letter, every phone call, every dinner where my mother read aloud something I'd written. He'd watch their faces do the thing faces do when they're genuinely proud. And something in him, that particular rot that lives in people who've never had to earn love, had decided he couldn't stand it. So he told them I'd washed out. Not dramatically. Tom was never dramatic. He was worse than dramatic. He was plausible. He told them quietly, over dinner, that he'd spoken to someone at the base, that the Navy wasn't a good fit for me, that I'd requested a discharge and was too embarrassed to say so myself. He told them I was probably going to call soon to explain, and that they should be gentle with me because I was struggling. He told them not to push. So when I called 3 weeks later, my mother was gentle, carefully, painfully gentle, the way you are with someone you believe is fragile. She asked how I was doing in a voice that meant we know. I didn't understand the subtext. I thought she was just tired. I came home for Christmas, and my father met me at the door with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Not angry, worse. Disappointed in the particular way that means I expected more, and now I'm grieving it. We raised you better than to lie, he said. I didn't know what he meant. I said so. He said Tom had told them everything. I said Tom didn't know anything. But Tom was standing behind him in the hallway, and Tom shook his head slowly with a look of practiced sorrow, and my father closed the door. Just like that. The door of the house I grew up in closed in my face. I stood on that porch for 4 minutes. I know because I counted. Then I walked back to my car and drove to a motel. motel on Route 1 and sat on the edge of a bed with a floral comforter and a broken air conditioning unit and stared at the wall until something inside me went very quiet. Not numb, quiet. There's a difference. The quiet said, you have a choice right now. You can let this hollow you out, or you can go back to work. I went back to work. Part 4, 12 years. People ask, when they find out the broad shape of the story, the part I've let become public, whether it destroyed me, whether I fell apart. I understand why they ask, but they're asking the wrong question. The question isn't what the loss did to me. The question is what I built inside it. I want to be honest about the years because sanitizing them into triumph would be its own kind of lie. There were nights, 200 nights, on deployments, in the Gulf, in the Pacific, in the specific loneliness of a bunk in a floating steel city with 200 other people, when I thought about the Christmas card I'd mailed that week and wondered if my mother had touched it before throwing it away. There were mornings when I watched other officers take calls from their parents and felt something move through me that I refused to call grief because grief required a death and my parents were alive and choosing. The third year, a card came back stamped return to sender. I held it for a long time. Then I put it in a box. Then I mailed another one the following December. I kept sending them. Every year. Love you. Thinking of you. No return address after the third year. I didn't want to give them the option to send it back again. Just the card. Just proof that I was still there. Still thinking of them. Still refusing to let Tom's lie become the final word. Not one response. Not one. What I did instead of falling apart, I made E5 in my third year. Petty Officer 2nd Class. My commanding officer at the time, Commander Gerald Park, 21 years in the Navy, the kind of man who could end a conversation with a single look, pulled me aside after the promotion and said, Mitchell, you are constitutionally incapable of doing anything halfway. That will either make you exceptional or kill you. Figure out which. I thought about that for years. I made chief at year 6. Year 8, I applied for the officer candidate program. I was 31, which is late, which everyone mentioned, which I took as useful information and nothing else. I graduated from OCS at Newport, Rhode Island, on a Tuesday in October in the rain, with my daughter Emily in the audience at 18 months old in a yellow raincoat that made her look like a very small maritime official. Emily. I should tell you about Emily because she's the part of this story that doesn't fit the narrative of pure survival. Her father and I met during my second deployment. Marcus Webb, IT specialist, kind man, fundamentally incompatible with the life I was building. We tried. We failed. We did it without hatred, which I consider one of my genuine accomplishments. He's in Seattle now, remarried, good to Emily on her summers. She is 7 years old, fearless, and has never once in her life seen me cry. She was 5 when I made lieutenant commander. She sat in the front row at the ceremony in Virginia Beach, dress wrinkled from the car ride, legs swinging because her feet didn't reach the floor. When I walked off the stage, she said, "Good job, Mom," with the calm assurance of someone reviewing a satisfactory report. I laughed, lifted her up, pressed my face into her hair. That night, after she was asleep, I sat on the porch and thought about the 2 empty seats. My parents had missed everything because of one lie, because of Tom. Part 5, the file. It arrived on a Monday morning in February, routed to my desk through standard channels, flagged for officer review because of the nature of the alleged offenses and the involvement of multiple commands. The cover sheet read, Investigation File, Mitchell Thomas A., Petty Officer 1st Class, Falsified Logistics Documentation, Multiple Counts. I read the name twice, looked at the date of birth, the hometown listed as Hopewell, Virginia. My brother had joined the Navy 5 years after I did. After telling our parents I couldn't handle it, after spending years as the son who stayed, the son who was present, the son who got to sit at the Christmas table while I mailed cards into silence, Tom had joined my branch, had served, had made Petty Officer 1st Class, which is not nothing. It requires time and evaluations and at least a surface-level competence. And then, apparently, he had done what Tom always does when competence runs out. He'd faked it. The file was 73 pages. I read all of it before 0800. Tom had been serving as a logistics coordinator at Naval Station Bremerton in Washington State for the previous 4 years. His job, simplified, was to verify and document the receipt and inspection of equipment, everything from replacement parts to electronics to safety gear. He signed off on inspections, confirmed shipments, certified that things existed and worked and were where they were supposed to be, except they weren't. Or he hadn't checked, or both. Over an 18-month period, Petty Officer 1st Class Thomas Mitchell had signed off on 34 inspection reports for equipment that was either non-existent, unverified, or arrived after the documentation said it had. The total value of improperly documented equipment, $340,000. Some of it was missing entirely. Some of it had been redirected. The investigation was still untangling which. 3 separate investigators had built the case. The lead was Special Agent Donna Carver, NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, 14 years on the job, the kind of investigator who documents everything in triplicate and whose reports read like architectural blueprints, precise and load-bearing. She'd been building this case for 8 months. My commanding officer, Captain James Okafor, 27 years of service, former JAG officer, a man who chose his words the way a surgeon chooses instruments, called me in at 0830. "You've seen the Mitchell file," he said. "Yes, sir." "You two related?" "Yes, sir. He's my brother." He studied my face for a long moment, not unkindly. "We can assign someone else to the oversight panel. Part of me, the part that still has a porch and a box of returned Christmas cards. Wanted to say yes, walk away, let someone else sit across from Tom in that room, let someone else watch our parents' faces when the evidence was read aloud. But I didn't make Lieutenant Commander by walking away from things because they were hard. I can handle it, sir. He held my eyes for another 3 seconds. Then he nodded. Your parents will likely be present, he said. Bremerton contacted next of kin. Understood, sir. I walked back to my office, sat down, put both hands flat on the desk for a moment, feeling the solid surface of it. Then I opened the file to page 1 and started taking notes. Part 6. What I found on page 61. I need to stop here, because what I found on page 61 of Tom's service record is the part of this story I haven't told publicly. The part that changes the shape of everything. I almost missed it. It was buried in the administrative section, the kind of bureaucratic appendix that most people skim. Personnel history, duty assignments, commendations, and correspondence. Tom had submitted a formal letter to the Navy Personnel Command in 2014, 7 years ago. The letter was a request, formally worded, citing regulations I recognized, to have family notification records updated for Thomas Mitchell, PO1. The update he'd requested that in the event of disciplinary action, injury, or death, next of kin notification should include his parents, Robert and Carol Mitchell of Hopewell, Virginia. Standard. Routine. Except attached to the request, as supporting documentation of family relationships, was a letter, a personal letter, written by Tom, to our parents. I don't have permission to reproduce it in full, and I'm not sure I could get through it if I tried. But the relevant section, the section that made me sit back in my chair and put my hand over my mouth and stare at the wall for 6 full minutes, read approximately as follows. I want you to know that Rachel is still serving. She never quit. I told you she did because I was young and stupid and jealous, and I've regretted it every year since. I'm writing this down because I'm too much of a coward to say it out loud, but I want it documented somewhere in case anything ever happens to me. She didn't deserve what I did. She deserved better parents than I let her have. The letter was dated 2014, 7 years ago. Our parents had received it. The personnel records showed delivery confirmation. In March of 2014. They had not contacted me. Not in 2014. Not in 2015. Not in any of the subsequent 7 years during which I continued mailing Christmas cards into the void, and they continued not responding. They had known the truth for 7 years, and said nothing. Part 7. The night before. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. This isn't a complaint. I've done more with less sleep than most people think is survivable, but I want to be precise about the texture of that night because it matters. Emily was with Marcus that week. My apartment in Virginia Beach was very quiet. I sat at my kitchen table with Tom's file and a yellow legal pad, the same brand my mother used to write her letters, and I organized my documentation for the oversight panel. I'd been assigned to the 3-person panel reviewing the evidentiary record. I wasn't the decision maker. I wasn't Tom's judge. My role was procedural. Verify the chain of evidence, flag inconsistencies, confirm that Special Agent Carver's documentation met the standards required for formal charges to proceed. I did that work between 2100 and 1:30. Then I went through it again. At 200, I made tea, stood at the kitchen window looking at the parking lot, the orange sodium lights, a cat crossing the asphalt with the particular confidence of an animal that doesn't know what a hearing is. I thought about the letter. Tom had written it, had documented his guilt in official military correspondence 7 years ago, had sent it to our parents with delivery confirmation. And our parents, my father, who said we raised you better than to lie, my father, whose handwriting I still recognized in my sleep, had received it, read it, and decided that 7 more years of silence was easier than a phone call. I want to be fair. I've worked hard at fairness because bitterness is weight you carry alone, and I've had enough of that. So here is my attempt at fairness. I don't know what they told themselves. I don't know if they were ashamed or afraid or so calcified in the version of the story Tom had given them that the truth felt like too much to absorb. I don't know if my mother took the letter out and reread it some nights. I don't know if my father ever drove past a Navy recruitment office and thought about the daughter he'd closed a door on. I don't know. What I know is that I buttoned my dress whites the next morning and looked in the mirror, and every ribbon on my chest was a year they'd missed. Emily wandered in at 06:15, rubbing her eyes. She'd been dropped off late the night before, Marcus running behind schedule. You look important, Mom. Just doing my job, kiddo. She studied me for a moment with the focused seriousness she brings to everything. Will you be home for dinner? Yes, I said. I'll be home for dinner. She nodded, satisfied, and went to find the cereal. I picked up my cover, put it under my arm, and walked out. Part 8. The hearing. The naval courtroom at Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek is not dramatic in the Hollywood sense. No wood paneling, no gallery of shocked onlookers, fluorescent lights, folding chairs, the particular institutional smell of government buildings everywhere, recycled air and floor cleaner, and something indefinably official. Special Agent Donna Carver was already at the table when I arrived. 43, compact, with close-cropped hair, and the eyes of someone who has been lied to professionally for 14 years, and is no longer surprised by any variation. She acknowledged me with a nod. Commander Mitchell. A pause. This one's going to be strange for you. It's going to be fine, I said. Commander Alicia Brandt, JAG, Judge Advocate General's Corps, 11 years, the attorney assigned to oversee the evidentiary proceedings, was reviewing documents at the far end of the table. She looked up, assessed me in a single sweep, and returned to her papers. Good. I didn't need sympathy from the room. I needed the room to function. The panel chair was Captain Raymond Folse, 31 years of service service, silver-haired, the kind of officer whose physical stillness communicates more authority than most people's shouting. He'd been briefed on my family relationship with the accused. He'd cleared me for the panel anyway, which told me something about his read of my file. Tom came in at Air 855 with his JAG-appointed defense counsel, Lieutenant Weaver, young, earnest, carrying a briefcase with the over-prepared energy of someone who knows the evidence is bad and is hoping for procedural salvation. Tom was in his dress blues. He'd gained weight since the last time I'd seen him, which was 12 years ago through a closing door. He didn't look at me when he sat down. My parents arrived at 858, third row, as I said. My father in his good gray suit, the one he wore to funerals and job interviews and apparently this. My mother in a blue cardigan. They were watching Tom. Then she looked up. I've described what happened in her face. I won't again. Some things only need to be said once. The hearing was methodical, clinical. The Navy doesn't shout, it just presents facts. Special Agent Carver walked through the documentation over 2 hours. 34 falsified inspection reports, 17 discrepancy logs, 4 witness statements from personnel who'd been asked to sign off on reports they hadn't personally verified. Equipment valued at $340,000, of which $180,000 was still unaccounted for. Not missing exactly, but moved, redirected, documented in ways that didn't survive scrutiny. Petty Officer Mitchell signed the documentation, the first witness said. Petty Officer Mitchell's authorization code appears on all 34 reports, said the second. I told him the equipment hadn't been received yet, said the third. He said to log it anyway. He said it was a timing thing. Every few minutes I felt my parents' eyes on me, on the uniform, on the insignia at my collar, on the woman who was supposed to have quit, sitting at the front of a Navy courtroom with a lieutenant commander's oak leaves on her shoulder boards and 12 years of documented service under her name. During the recess, I walked to the water fountain in the hallway. I was aware, without looking, of my mother following me. Rachel. I turned. She looked like she was trying to find a starting point and couldn't locate one. Her eyes went from my face to my collar to my face again. You're still in the Navy, she said. Yes, ma'am. I kept my voice even. I've had 12 years of practice keeping my voice even. My father had come up behind her. He was looking at my collar insignia with the focused attention of a man reading a document he doesn't fully understand. What rank is that? Lieutenant Commander. 04. I let that settle. I've held it for 3 years. Before that, 12 years of service your son told you didn't exist. My father looked at the floor of a Navy installation, the floor his daughter had been walking on in various forms for 15 years. Tom came out of the courtroom door. The 4 of us stood in the hallway. Nobody moved for a moment. It was the first time we'd been in the same physical space in 12 years, and it had the strangeness of a dream where the geography is wrong. Familiar people in an impossible setting. My father turned to Tom. When he spoke, his voice was low, the voice he used when he was past anger and into something colder. Why? Not a question. A demand for an accounting. Tom rubbed the back of his neck. The same gesture he'd made since childhood when caught in something. The same tell I'd watched him use on teachers and coaches and our parents 100 times. Some things don't get trained out of you. Because she was doing better than me, he said, quietly, almost to himself, and I couldn't stand it. The hallway held that sentence for a long moment. I didn't think it would go this far, he added. Which part? I asked. The lie that cost me my family for 12 years, or the fraud that's going to cost you your career? He looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw something in his face that I hadn't expected and didn't particularly want. Not remorse, exactly, but recognition. The look of someone who has finally run out of road. Both, he said. I straightened my jacket, smoothed the front. Every ribbon lined up. Neither did I said. Then I walked back into the courtroom. Part 9. What the file contained. I want to tell you about page 61. I want to tell you in this room, in this setting, because my parents were still in the hallway when I made the decision about what to do with it, and the decision, once made, was not reversible. I had 2 choices. The first, say nothing. The letter was personal correspondence attached to an administrative filing. It was not evidence in the fraud case. It was not required for the proceedings. I could complete my role on the oversight panel, submit my documentation, and go home to Emily and never mention the letter to anyone. The second, tell them. Not as a weapon. I want to be precise about this, because I've been accused, by Tom's defense counsel, in a post-hearing filing that went nowhere, of using the letter to cause emotional distress during active proceedings. That accusation is false, and was ruled as such. I told my parents about the letter after the hearing, in the parking lot, with no legal proceeding ongoing and no strategic advantage to gain. I told them because they deserved to know the full shape of what had been done to them, not just to me. My father's face when I handed him the printed page was the most complicated thing I have ever watched happen to a human being. He read it standing up, in a parking lot, in his good gray suit, in the November light. His lips moved slightly on certain words. When he finished, he folded it once, looked at it, folded it again. 2014, he said. March. Delivery confirmed. My mother made a sound I won't describe. She put her hand over her mouth, the same gesture from the courtroom, and turned away for a moment. My father looked at me. The expression on his face was not what I'd spent 12 years imagining. I'd imagined relief or guilt, or the particular collapse of a man confronting his own failure. What I saw instead was simpler and harder. He looked like someone waking hang up. I don't know what to say to you, he said. I know. There isn't anything I know, Dad. He nodded. Once. The same nod from the Christmas cards. Working hard. Good. Reduced now to its barest form. We stood in the parking lot for another minute. The November wind came off the water. My mother had composed herself and was standing very straight, the way people stand when they're holding something together by force of will. Do you want to meet Emily? I said. Neither of them spoke. She's 7, I said. She's at school until 3. I could. Yes, my mother said. She said it before I'd finished the sentence. Yes, please. Part 10. Aftermath. Tom's naval career ended officially on a Thursday in December. Captain Folse's panel recommended formal charges. Commander Brandt's JAG review confirmed the evidentiary record was sufficient. Special Agent Carver's case, all 73 pages of it, held up without a single successful challenge from the defense. Tom accepted a plea agreement, reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, a formal reprimand, and a less than honorable discharge. The missing $180,000 in equipment was eventually traced to a redirected shipment that had been logged under a different unit's inventory. Tom hadn't pocketed it exactly. He'd just moved things around to cover gaps, and the gaps had grown, and the cover had become its own crime. He didn't go to prison. I want to be honest about that because I know it's what some people need from a story like this. He didn't. He received a federal reprimand and a financial penalty, and he lost the career and the rank and the pension he'd been 4 years from vesting. He moved back to Hopewell, which struck me as either brave or oblivious, and I've decided I don't need to know which. My parents came to Virginia Beach in January. My mother brought pot roast in a Dutch oven wrapped in towels in a canvas bag, which is how my mother has transported pot roast for as long as I can remember. And the smell of it in my apartment did something to me that the entire previous day in a courtroom had not. Emily interrogated them for 45 minutes about their house, their car, whether they'd ever seen a real Navy ship, and what my father's favorite dinosaur was. He said Brontosaurus, which Emily informed him was now called Brachiosaurus, and he took the correction with good grace. My mother sat at my kitchen table and looked at the yellow legal pad I'd left there, and said, I used to use those for letters. I know, I said. She looked at me. I kept them, I said. All of them. Everyone you sent before it stopped. She was quiet for a long moment. I kept yours too, she said. Even after. I kept them in the shoebox. I thought about the return to sender card, the one I'd kept in a box of my own. Why didn't you? I started. Because I didn't know how, she said. Because by the time I understood what your father and I had done, it had been so long that I didn't know how to start. She looked at her hands. That's not an excuse. I know it isn't. I just want you to know it wasn't nothing. It was never nothing. I sat down across from her. In the living room, Emily was explaining the entire hierarchical structure of the United States Navy to my father, with the aid of a diagram she'd drawn herself, and he was listening with complete attention. I don't have a clean ending to offer you. Not the kind where everything is resolved and healed and the credits roll. That's not how 12 years works. That's not how any of this works. What I have is a January afternoon, my mother at my kitchen table, my daughter's voice in the next room, my father's quiet attention bent toward a 7-year-old with a hand-drawn diagram, and on my wrist, the watch I bought myself when I made lieutenant commander, a Seiko. Nothing flashy, the kind built for people who need it to work rather than need it to be seen. It keeps perfect time. It always has. Tom knows what I found on page 61. He knows I gave it to our parents. He hasn't reached out. I don't expect him to. But here's what he doesn't know, what I haven't said publicly until now. There was a second letter in that file, written in 2019. Same format, same delivery confirmation. In it, Tom had written down the name of the unit I was serving with, my current rank, and my deployment schedule. Enough that our parents could have found me on any day of the last 7 years if they'd chosen to look. He'd been feeding them a trail of breadcrumbs for years, without the courage to hand them a map. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not sure I need to do anything with it. The Navy teaches you something that took me a long time to fully understand. You don't control the conditions. You control your response to them. Tom couldn't stand that I was doing better than him. He spent 15 years trying to make me smaller. Instead, he handed me a courtroom, and I walked into it in dress whites. Emily asked me last week what the hearing was about. I told her it was about someone who told a lie for so long he forgot it was a lie. She thought about that for a minute. Did you fix it? She asked. Some of it, I said. She nodded. That counts, she said. It does.